We are going to talk about today about the rally in Chicago and also about the end of the grain deal in the Black Sea. And Jerry Gidel is ready right here on Connected Farmer, your channel to keep you up to date with the latest trends in agriculture and livestock. So, Jerry, we have plenty of things to talk about today, starting with the grain deal. But let's start first with the week, what happened in the week. Then we talk about the grain deal and your numbers for the upcoming USDA report. So, what happened this week? What did you see that ended up with this rally in Chicago?
Well, I think the one thing that the market was reacting to uh, the technical get me out kind of signals the week before. We really went oversold on a lot of things. From there, talking about the weather in the U.S. and the El Nino is going to straighten everything out because we did have some rains across the Southwest, and that and the fact that. Oh, we're going to plant all these things. Well, the fact it was too cool kind of impacted that. And then also when closer observations here on the weather in how much it did rain and where it rained maybe didn't save the whole U.S. winter wheat crop. So I think those type of two things kind of settled in and that. And then the other the other things were world information situations and that one of them of course is the Black Sea, and as you mentioned in your opening scenarios here about the potential Black Sea corridor unwinding, what a deal that could make it into world numbers.
Yes, and what are you seeing as an impact from South America? Because we have learned that Brazil is having issue to ship all the volume that is getting from the soybean harvest. There's no storage, no roads, no railroads.
Well, that's been an ongoing thing that's plagued Brazil and over the years of outproducing their transportation systems and things like that. This year, it's really got significant because a lot of the producers didn't make any sales ahead of time and didn't get some of the early harvest moved as quickly as it should have, and that really caused a lot of backlogs in that. And particularly now, so much of it is now moved north and through the Amazon at this point. The infamous BR 163 road does it goes all the way to the Amazon, but most of the time it only gets up to one of the tributaries before they put it on the boat, and that's been a big factor, no doubt about it. Psychologically, also it kind of impacted the. Now all of a sudden there's a mess in soybeans. Now the corn harvest is going to do the same, and we really had a highly emotional scenario where the summertime basis levels in Brazil for corn also took a tumble, and so you put that two together. It psychologically, I'm not sure is it's bad. This is more of a psychological scenario than it is a total issue. There's all this assumption that there's going to be all this beans and corn and a total mess. And there's going to be both of them going on. I don't know this as bad as the world wants to, or the Brazilians want to make it, but that's nothing unusual when you get to these kind of scenarios from there. But I think the one thing that I think is starting to also come into play here is the impact of Argentina's reduced crops. There's going to be smaller crops being projected here by the USDA. They were behind the last time around, and there continues to be reports. Actually, this yesterday afternoon, someone threw out a number below 20 million for the Brazilian bean crop. That's quite a number if it shows up. The USDA is at 27. I'm anticipating a 24 million metric ton crop, and that. Argentina's bean crop was definitely it never really got started. That's the biggest problem about it. Usually soybeans have a chance to get up and kind of shade themselves and kind of hang in there for moisture to come. So many places the bean crop got out of the ground but never got enough height, and so it just kind of fried. So I think there's a lot of acres out there that are not going to be productive, but that's not being totally reflected yet in that. And the percentage of harvest, I think a lot of that has to do with the fact that they're not going to go out and harvest because there's not much to harvest. So that's another twist of this thing in South America and that. But right now, at least, some of the beans that are in Brazil are not going to switch over and go to Argentina and not into the world markets, and to some extent kind of balance out some of the issues down there. But to some extent, that doesn't mean that there's a lot of the world trade numbers that people are looking at, and to some extent, even the U.S. I think the one thing that kind of popped up this last week had a very, very good U.S. crush came out for March, and second highest ever. And I think that reflects the idea that the world likes some places like meal. They don't need soybeans and I think that's a real feature here, that the U.S. is going to pick up some of Argentina's meal business around the world. And I think that's an interesting twist in here that could have an impact on our carryover stock in the U.S.
Yes, and about the grain deal, most likely there will be no grains exported from Ukraine. Or how do you see that impacting the markets?
Oh, that's a huge impact in that in corn and soybeans. To some extent, there's been a little bit of a pickup in their rapeseed production here, and so that concentrates some of the wealth in that scenario. But in general, the Ukrainians started out trying to do, and still do, ship a lot of stuff by rail. The biggest problem in this thing is that when the transfer from their rail system to the rest of the world's rail system, and that on the borders there across Eastern Europe, somehow or other, some of this grain has not been keeping and going on to export to other countries, and it's aggravated a lot of countries. Of course, we've got Poland's right there, and they want to be a supporter of Ukraine but they even have got to the point of let's get this straightened out. And they've even said they weren't going to take anything. And Poland, Hungary, Romania, these have made that mention. And we had a kind of a major eruption, if you want to say, but between these countries and the EU. They finally, EU has said you can't really do this, and now they've got a deal set that they will resume shipments on early June. But I think the key thing on this thing is that without the ports, Odessa and a couple other ones there open and shipping, the total volume of grains coming out of Ukraine will be cut back 70-80%, maybe more from there. And so that's going to make a big difference in the trading volumes out there. I'm not sure exactly what the Russians are looking at there. They want to complain about their banking system connections. They want to complain about insurance. They want this kind of stuff. But they've actually shipped more grain this year total than so far than last year at this point. They've made workarounds. They've done it. But now all of a sudden, they think this is an advantage to them to try to press and reduce the amount of money that's available to the Ukrainians to fight the war. And I guess that's their mindset. And they're not agreeing or even come to the table. We had a couple dates this last week that were, first it was going to be on Wednesday that we were going to have some type of meeting. And the impression was it was going to be some type of higher level type meeting and then they postponed it from Wednesday to Friday. And then Friday, well, no, we're only having technical people show up. I'm not even sure where it was. It was in Istanbul or where. But anyway, it turns out that that in essence, the real discussions have now been postponed to next week. And it's kind of surprising that there was even an idea that there was going to be some kind of high level meeting this early against the deadline of May 18th. But that didn't help the psychology of things here about this thing. And I think that also added to the tensions and potentially to the market response at the end of the week was that, this thing is getting serious and we're going to lose certain volumes of things in the world markets. And all of a sudden, I think there was some realization here that prices in other places and around across the world was potentially going to go higher without the supplies coming from Ukraine.
Yes, and for the upcoming USDA report, what are your highlights?
Well, there's a lot of things to look at there, to say the least. The one factor that always comes in the May report is that the USDA comes in and looks at the world expectations. Those are really tough ones, particularly in some crops where you really have unsettled situations like we have going on now, and world trade situations on the old crop. Most of these are based upon June. World numbers are based upon July through June of say, in this case, 2023 through 2024. And that, so it makes things somewhat of a crapshoot. But the one thing that we kind of anticipate here in the U.S. is, of course, is how we're going to look at our old crop S&Ds. And that, I think the one that's, and I think to some extent the market kind of looked at this too, with soybeans have been somewhat of an upward leader this last week on things. And I think part of it's the fact that we have continued to see shipments. They're down seasonally, but they're still going well. And at the same time, the U.S. crush number we talked about was strong, and that. So I think that I anticipate the old crop U.S. soybean crush, or excuse me, Indian carryover stock, should be anywhere from 10 to 15 million down. Well, that's not a big number, but the problem is we're at 210, so we're down at the bottom of the barrel here on the U.S. Indian carryover stocks, and so I think that's one of the big ones I'll be watching. Wheat, sluggish there. We could see a 10 million cut in exports on old crop. Corn is kind of the same thing. Part of it's because, of course, interestingly enough, we had some pretty good purchases from China and that and over the last 6 or 8 weeks. And now all of a sudden they decided to make a cancellations. And that's part of the reason things started to go down last week and that. And so the market reaction, I think they'll anticipate, and I do myself, that the USDA carryover stock could actually rise by 50 million. But these are just adjustments in that. As we look into next year, it's kind of interesting in the fact that with this U.S. wheat crop that looks pretty tough out there right now, that the carryover stock for next year might actually slip a little bit from the estimates and maybe similar to this year's 598 million number. Corn is probably the one that everybody stares at, and you looked at the USDA's likely ideas for the 23-24 year. They're still going to use those numbers they came up with here on the planning numbers at 92 million and 87.5 on plantings and so they're going to, the expectations that people are looking at are going to probably stay right at unchanged from the ideas that were thrown out there on March 31st, which makes some pretty substantial crops. So the carryover stock on corn is substantial. I guess as you've heard in the past in my conversations with the USDA at that data users meeting, that I feel like that the USDA's 181.5 number is pretty optimistic for the upcoming year. If 178.5, 179 number was used, I think would be more realistic, but that's not what they're going to do. So you got to just anticipate that still being there along the way. So those are some of the numbers to look at. Oh, the one thing that we interestingly on U.S. wheat's production, and that because the winter wheat plantings this year were up nearly 4 million acres, even if you're losing some substantial plantings because of weather and the harvested areas are going to be down, the twist of it is that when you add up the totals, and right now I'm anticipating like about a 40 million decline in winter wheat production in the hard red in the Southwest, but the higher plantings in soft red are going to end up increasing that crop by maybe 60 or 70 million. And the Pacific Northwest plantings could increase that one anywhere from 10 to 20. So overall, the winter wheat numbers that the USDA could issue could be higher than last year's. Like, how does this happen? Because we're talking about all this problems in the plains, but that's it. It's only in the plains. The one thing that has happened though is the anticipation is that the higher corn and soybean prices are going to put less spring wheat in the ground, and overall the production number for wheat still could be off. Let me see here. What do I coming up with there? With a number just a smidgen under 1.8 versus the expectations over the winter about 1.9 on things. So the wheat number in the U.S. is kind of a twisted logic, and to some extent I've even heard issues that my number situation out there on this stuff could be it could be higher than this looking back on things from there. So from that point, so on that, so there's a lot of numbers next Friday before we get back together again, but at the same time many of these things, probably one of the other big factors that's going to influence the world here is the Argentinian numbers. Last time around, the USDA's production number on corn was 37. I kind of feel that's going to be closer to 34, 35 million metric tons, because there's numbers down there in the low 30s. And soybeans, a similar situation. The USDA was at 27 last time around, and they're at 20. I'm estimating at 24. As I said earlier, that number I've heard numbers substantially lower than that, and it's really as a crapshoot on Argentinian soybeans. Brazil's an interesting one. Of course, we've heard different commentary about things. The one thing about corn is particularly interesting. This is a really crucial time for corn in Brazil, in Mato Grosso. From, I'd have to say, a week or so maybe ago through the middle of May up, and particularly the crop being planted a little bit behind schedule, and that makes it a crucial time for Mato Grosso and things are heating up. There's lots of 90s to 100s up there so it's going to be real interesting. That's the reason why I think the USDA is going to be unchanged. Soybeans, they're still kind of creeping up on ideas here that their production up there has been good. I did hear something from your old stomping grounds of Rio Grande do Sul that they have slipped their crop off by about a metric ton or 1.5 metric tons in that. So I'm kind of anticipating the USDA to only go up 1 million to 155 million metric tons. But the whole focus in South America is on Argentina.
All right. We'll check it out. Thank you very much.
Yeah, we have plenty of things to talk. See you next week. And at this point, at least, I think the markets are going to be a lot more sensitive about issues in the Black Sea, of course, and also South America. So we'll be. I kind of feel like a little bit more of a bounce potential could happen here, but it's a twisted one here at this juncture. If the USDA decides to give us a little bit of a head fake.